an issue. And how we deal with it is what's important. So to get things started, first of all, there's restrooms in the back. Art gallery is here. There's sandwiches. There's desserts. Please help yourself. Just don't throw any food. But anyhow, I want to welcome Britney Wolf to our discussion tonight. It's great to have you here. You really hit it at an odd time of year for us because all the schools, you know, are back in session. We have a partnership with Westminster Entrepreneurial as well as Eastern Gate. The problem right now is all the fall sports and everything are trying to be crammed in. Students are at school with exams and everything else. I really didn't know what kind of, you know, how much support we have here for Britney, but it is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube. And when you go to YouTube, just check out Youngstown Score Presents, and it'll be loaded up in a few days. Watching it again. But Britney, I'm going to turn it over to you. Love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Still see you or not?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk to us into these to the computer here, you guys. So, as all of you here know today, my name is Britney Wolf. I'm here to talk about my life with Tourette Syndrome. I was diagnosed in my childhood. I'm now 31, so I've been living with Tourette Syndrome for about over 20 years. So I always start the same way. I want to start out with facts about Tourette Syndrome. First and foremost, I want to talk about the misconception, biggest misconception with Tourette Syndrome, which is the swearing disease. Media, Hollywood, television, everything, we're a punchline to everybody pretty much in the world. We're getting a lot of traction thanks to social media. We're going in the right direction finally, I feel like. But a lot of people still tell me that, or ask me if I swear all the time, and if they've known me for months. I always tell you the same thing. If I'm swearing around you, it makes me very, very angry. I don't want to swear. The other interesting fact about that most people don't know is that only 10% of people with Tourette syndrome have what's called glotolalia, which is the actual swearing, the name of the swearing disorder, the swearing part of Tourette syndrome. For those 10% of people with Tourette syndrome, it is very, very real. It's people saying things that they never would say probably in a normal setting, because this is children saying obscenities or maybe saying slurs or anything else that we don't. The more you don't want to say it, the more Tourette syndrome makes you say it. Not wanting to do a tick, not wanting to do something is a trigger for Tourette syndrome. Unfortunately, a really bad domino effect of Tourette syndrome. So that is the biggest misconception that I always try to get wiped out, because for those 10% of people, it's because it's such a joke on television, people like to laugh, people like to, you know, joke around with it and say that they have Tourette syndrome, but then when they come face to face with it, somebody in the grocery store or something, all of a sudden it's not funny anymore and it's not real anymore. You must be crazy, you must be on drugs. People get approached by security, they get kicked out of grocery stores. I've seen this happen. I've seen fellow Tourette people in the Tourette syndrome community talk about this on social media, but I've been blessed to connect with, showing videos of people literally kicking them out of somewhere because they have Tourette syndrome. And even after they explain that they have Tourette syndrome, they still don't care. But all of a sudden, that's not what it really is. That's just what confusion. You don't really have that. I've seen it happen. It's heartbreaking and it's infuriating for me, even as a person who doesn't have this right part. Another thing that people tend to possibly maybe not know is that Tourette syndrome is a neurological condition. So it's a part of my brain. It's a teeny tiny thing in my brain that sends misfiring signals that makes me move. It makes me throw my arms. It makes me kick my feet. It makes me move my head. It makes any body part that I have move whenever it feels like it. I have absolutely no control over it, and I will never have any control over it. 1 in 100 children have Tourette syndrome or some kind of tick disorder. To be diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, however, officially, you have to have vocal and physical tics or motor tics, which are motor tics or physical tics. You have to show symptoms for about a year in order for that diagnosis to happen from a neurologist. Another very, very important fact is that it's rarely just tics. So a lot of people think that it's just tics, and even saying just tics is kind of going to me in my head because tics are probably the most uncomfortable thing that I've ever had in my life. And along with the tics comes anxiety, comes OCD, could have ADD, ADHD. People with autism can also have Tourette syndrome, vice versa. You can be on the autism spectrum with Tourette syndrome. A lot of people with Tourette's are on the autism spectrum as well. So we have all of these things battling each other and making the tics worse as well. When my anxiety gets worse, my tics get worse. When my obsessive thoughts get worse, my OCD, my tics get worse. So they go hand in hand. Or when I tick, I have to tick certain ways. I have to tick in certain numbers. It has to be even. And if I don't do that right, and I don't do it the exact right way, I have to do it again. And then I have to do it faster. And eventually, if I keep doing it wrong, it'll lead to a tick attack where I just tick with multiple parts of my body, where I have that tick over and over again, where I cannot breathe, and not a fun time. Then every single person with Tourette syndrome is different. Just because you know one person with Tourette syndrome doesn't mean the next person that you meet is going to have Tourette syndrome or is going to have the same tics as that one person that you know with Tourette syndrome. A lot of people like to say, especially on social media, that you don't tick the same way as this person that I know that has Tourette's faking it. They don't realize that we're all different. Our tics could be maybe similar, but they're still different. There's different severities, there's different levels, there's different ways people handle it. There's different ways people kind of learn how to hide it or make it look more natural. A lot of my neck tics, they look like I'm stretching sometimes when I have a tick that makes me kind of freeze in the tick. It just looks like I'm stretching my neck. A lot of times when I'm in public or at work, I will start to put my hand on my neck to make it seem like that is what I was doing. Because there are some days where I just don't feel like explaining myself and explaining Tourette syndrome to somebody as much as I love talking about it. And with that too being different, every single day is also different. I could barely tick it off throughout this whole thing, and I could tick like crazy on my way home. I could barely have a day of tics, and then the next 10 could be filled with them from the minute I wake up to the second that I fall asleep, which I have had days like that in high school and in college. So it's very, very different for everyone. So the next thing, I was going to have a exercise here, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So I'm just going to go back to my other slide, but I always try to bring people into my world a little bit with Tourette syndrome. I think in order to have that empathy when I'm telling the story, you have that connection, you want to learn how to, or I want you to learn how to almost feel what it's like for me to tick. Now, this is just a very, very, very small glimpse, but it's how I kind of help people. And so because I'm making it a little bit different than it's kind of on the fly rather than what I would normally do. So what I'm going to have everybody do is I'm going to have my watch going so I can give you time. I'm going to give you I'll give you about 15 seconds the first time. And everybody watching on Zoom as well, please feel free to try this out as well. So the first thing I'm going to have you do, and again, this is just 15 seconds, I'm going to make this tick more complex the longer we go. So the next 15 seconds, I'm going to make you do 2 things at the same time, and then 3, and so on. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm just going to have you click your wrist. You're just going to do this, and I might start to turn around as you do this because it is a real tip for me, and it will trigger me, but it's worth the presentation. So I'm going to put 15 seconds and just start flicking your wrist, whatever pace you want to do it at. You know, sometimes I hit it off things when I'm doing this. Everything else, and remember, this is just 15 seconds. And I'm going to stop you here in a second. And okay, so that is just one thing that I do. This happens sometimes when I'm writing because the motion of writing triggers that movement for me to flip my wrist. It makes me, this is how I also slam my hand down on my keyboard, or I slam my mouse down and I have to do it a certain way. And so that is one thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make you do both And then after that, we'll do one more thing. We're gonna add the lower body to your hips so you can really feel this like. So again, this is just gonna be 15 seconds again. And we're gonna go ahead and go. So then both your wrists, and you're gonna do it. You're not allowed to stop because when you have Tourette syndrome, you're not allowed to stop. I don't have a choice. As much as I want to stop, I have to keep going every single time I do it. And as you can imagine, the wrist gets sore. It's really, really exhausted and tiring, even if it's just a small little motion, because there's overuse. It might seem small, but the more you overuse that body part, the more it's gonna hurt. All right, and stop. I actually had to do those 20 seconds that time. So the next one, you're gonna be flicking your wrist, but I want you to take the legs, and you're gonna do both of them. So you have to be flicking your wrist, and you're gonna have your legs. We're gonna do 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Because remember, I have to even everything out every time I when I do it with one hand, I have to do it with the other. But you're gonna do the same thing. As you flick your wrist, you're also gonna be doing that. Remember, you're having to concentrate on how many times you do it and everything else. So go ahead, and start. So remember, you're gonna be flicking your wrist. You're gonna be tapping your legs. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I want you to imagine trying to do this under a table while you're a child in a classroom, or while you're at your desk at work, trying to hide this under your table, or while also paying attention to the meeting that is in front of you, or while also trying to take notes and pay attention to my voice talking to you right now, and then letting that soak in while you're also trying to hide this at the same time from somebody. And I'll go ahead and have you stop. I'm gonna start to So those are real tics that I have. I don't tap my feet as much. I more or less kick up the ground mostly with my legs, but I do have the tapping tics. A tapping tick, whether it be with my feet, my hands, it's the biggest one. I tap my phone. I have sent friend requests that I have not once sent. I have answered survey questions that I have not answered. I've almost gotten myself locked out of my phone because of the password in front of my camera, so I'll keep tapping and putting the wrong password too many times and hitting the same button over and over rather than actual passcode in my phone. So I always do that first because I want people to understand just a teeny bit, because that was only about a minute and a half for you guys, or that could be an entire day for me. It can be that active for me sometimes. And even if it's only that active for an hour of my day, I'm wiped out. It's so tiring. A day where I tick like that, I feel like I'm running a marathon. I feel like I have been going nonstop because I have. And even though I'm tired, I still don't stop. When I'm tired, my body's stressed, so I take more. People think when I'm tired, I will take less. I really wish that was true, but it's really aggravating and it's not. So I always like to start with that and bring people in. In this one, I have this picture of me and Justin. So I was diagnosed at 7 years old. This is the day I was diagnosed, this photo that I have here that my aunt showed me a couple years ago, I think. And I remember feeling emotional when I saw it, because you wouldn't tell that I just got diagnosed with a lifelong chronic disorder in that photo to me. I'm just a happy kid having fun with my little cousin. And I think that really encompasses everything that has happened for the way my life has gone with Tourette syndrome, because all of my family and my mom have made me feel it's an issue. So to me, it never was an issue. I remember asking my mom one day that I told him I don't remember anybody ever like making a big deal about it or talking to me saying like, oh, I can't believe you have this or anything like that. And that's because she told them not to do that. She didn't want me to feel that way. She didn't want me to feel like everything was crumbling around me or anything like that. And I think that's a big testament to who I am today, because she made me feel like I was capable of anything and that this was just another thing. And so that's how I felt. First few noticeable tics that I've had were sniffing, flipping my neck back, and tics with my stomach muscles. So my sniffing tic, although my grandma probably doesn't like me telling the story, this was before we found out that I had Tourette syndrome. I used to sniff a lot, apparently. I don't necessarily remember sniffing, but I remember my grandma constantly telling me to blow my nose when I didn't have to blow my nose. And I know she feels bad about it, but it makes me laugh when I think about it. But I remember that. I remember thinking in my head that I don't have to grow my nails. But I did it anyways, because I was sniffing, so I guess I like something was right. And that's how a lot of first ticks kind of present themselves. It's sniffing, or it is clearing the throat. And some doctors tell parents that they probably just have allergies. They're doing it that often, and then they get treated for allergies, and then it keeps happening, or it gets worse. That's when they eventually start to realize, like, maybe they start moving more, maybe they start saying things, making noises, and it goes into the Tourette diagnosis. I've been told by many parents that doctors have told them that, and that's all it is. That's probably not Tourette, whatever they think. So, as I said, my tics can change. I never know what I'm going to do. The severity can change, as well as the types of tics. Some of my tics from my childhood, I no longer have, thank goodness. It's included straddle jumping on Christmas Eve, flipping my head all the way down and back up. Every once in a while, when I'm drying my hair, I have to flip my head up really fast, and I always think that tics back. I remember when I was younger, my friends and I used to make movies together, which would be probably incredibly embarrassing to watch now, but we were making a Halloween movie, and my friends were always really great with it, whether they were my friends today or not, they were incredible. We were making a movie, and I had that tic, and I was a dancer at the time, so they were like, well, just, your character's just going to be talking about how you're going to be a dancer, and so we were just being like, I'm going to be a dancer, so, and they just accepted whatever my daughter did. My friend walked me to the nurse. And so those tics can come back. I can get any one of those tics back. I could have a new tick today and I could have it for the rest of my life. I could have a new tick today, only have it today. I never know. I developed a new tick the night before we left, 2 days before we left for vacation back in April. I was incredibly excited about vacation because we were not allowed to go anywhere for a year, and I was very excited to get away. And I developed a breathing tic, right? Breathe in and out, really, 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 really. Nose. It instantly gave me a sinus headache. And it was a brand new tick. And once we went on vacation, it was gone. I've not done it again since. But that one was a hard one for me because the next following day I ended up having to work early because I couldn't talk on any of my meetings. Because every time I talked, I would do a breathing tic and I couldn't speak. So it was kind of having to not do things because my tics get bad. And I always get nervous that people have to leave me because for 2.5 years leading up to that day, I've never had to do that before. And that's just what I always hope people understand is that it can be like that. And one day it can just get really bad. And then just another quick thing is that when I was younger, talking about my Tourette syndrome and starting to advocate, that was just a normal thing for me. It made sense to me. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted people to know why I was doing it. To me, in my head, it made more sense to explain it ahead of time rather than somebody watching me, laughing at me, and talking about me or whispering about me. I'd rather get to them before that ever became a thing. And for me, everybody else in my life just acted like it was normal, so me, it was nothing else. Just who I was as a person, and that was fine. So I just wanted to make everybody else feel that way. So that leads me to the day that I knew something was different. This was the very first day that I consciously noticed my body doing something that I didn't want it to. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I remember every pretty much detail about it. We were in the car on the way home from my grandma's house. My brother was laying down in the back seat. I was in the front seat because I must have been able to call shotgun before him that day. And I remember my mom obviously driving the car, but I remember everything. I remember her hair ponytail. I remember seeing really well on the radio, like shining on the side of her face. I remember watching the mountains go by, watching the trees go by. I remember it, and I'm back into it, and I tend to take a lot because it was a scary time for me as a kid. And so I was sitting there in the car, or listening to the radio, and all of a sudden I feel this really weird feeling. I feel this feeling like I have to move my stomach muscles. And I don't know how I knew at the time kind of what I had to do, but I just felt it. And I kept telling myself, even with young, like, I shouldn't have to do this. It's my body, like I can stop myself from doing this. so I kept trying not to do it, kept trying not to do it, but kept growing stronger and more uncomfortable. And eventually I had no choice, just escape my body. I couldn't stop it any longer. And you know, when I did it, I kind of like moved it a little bit and jumped a little bit. So in the car, my mom asked me, Brittany, what are you doing? And I looked at her and said nothing, because I didn't know what I was doing. Because even though my mom is the most amazing person in the entire world, and she wasn't asking me, she wasn't going to yell at me or anything like that, I was afraid to say, like, I don't know, because that doesn't make sense. You're not going to believe me that I told you that I didn't mean to do that. And I knew that didn't make sense in my head. And so I just said nothing, and I went back to the beach. My mom didn't push the issue. We moved on. So I'm like, all right, great. I did it. That was that. Never did it. Perfect. Shortly after that, the urge came back, and it was even stronger. And I felt it. I felt it in my shoulders. I felt it in my stomach. It felt like something was just like boiling inside of me. In not necessarily a painful way, but an uncomfortable way. And at that point, I wasn't even really holding it for me. I wasn't able to, I had even less control than the first time I felt that. And so my body did it again. And again, my mom asked me what I was doing. And I looked at her and said, nothing. And I looked back out the window because I didn't know what was happening. And that second time was even scarier. It happened again. I thought the first time I did it, if I did it, it would never happen again. And I couldn't do it anymore. I don't know why it's making me a little bit emotional right now, but that was the first, because when I think about it, that was the time where, that was the last day in my mind that I had control over anything. That was the last day that my body was fine. And even though I'm thankful for what Tourette Syndrome has taught me and who it's made me become, I would love it if I woke up tomorrow and my body was mine. I would love it if I never took it anymore and never felt like that was an embarrassment to my husband or the store or almost falling into the store or something like that. I know I'm not, and I know people never think that, but it goes through my mind. After that, that led to me going to the doctor. So I didn't know it at the time, but my mom was asking me to see what I would say specifically. And me telling her that I wasn't doing anything was probably concerning. And I know that she had watched a television show at one point that had Tourette Syndrome on it, and it kind of made sense. So she made the appointment, and I eventually went to my neurologist. I went to that neurologist for about a year straight for those appointments. To be diagnosed with Tourette Syndrome, they want to see those symptoms for a year. They want to see you have them, so it's not just maybe like anxious or, just nervous tics or something. I want to be sure. And so I went to that neurologist for a year, and eventually I got that Tourette Syndrome diagnosis. I don't remember a lot about those appointments. I was only probably 6 since I was diagnosed at 7 years old. Honestly, the only thing I remember is getting a blow pop every time in the bridge in front of the building. All I remember and getting my reflexes tested. All I remember, which is probably fine, because that means they weren't that traumatic for me. But that led into my diagnosis. And I always like to tell that story because it's so hard to explain the feeling of even being a child, knowing that something wasn't right, and all of a sudden my body wasn't for me anymore. That something else was taking over. I didn't know what it was. I still wonder what the heck this is sometimes and why I have to go through this. But it picked me for whatever reason, and that's fine. I always say that it's because I was strong enough to deal with it, and I'm okay with that. So, but that was the first time that I remember taking, because as you remember, I talked about sniffing a lot. I didn't realize that was tick. So to me, sniffing was just sniffing. It didn't matter. I had points before we sniffed. That didn't feel as out of my control as my entire stomach taking control. So as I got older, after that day, after that diagnosis, after my family learning about it and me learning about what this life was going to look like for me possibly, there was a lot of stigmas, there was a lot of stereotypes, which that means saying that I probably wouldn't do well in school and life would be really, really difficult for me and all of these things. But I am the type of person, or my parents raised me to be the type of person that if you tell me I'm not going to be able to do something, I'm going to prove to you that I can. And I think that really helps me. And so what that happened was that turned into me just talking about it as a natural thing that turned into advocacy. And that advocacy turned into a really big passion of mine because I wanted to help people. If I can help one person learn what Tourette syndrome is, if I can help one person feel better about having Tourette syndrome, then I did what I was meant to do, in my opinion. And that was really cool. And I knew that I had to be my own advocate from a very young age. I think my mom and I both knew that we had to learn about this on our own. There wasn't a lot of information out there at the time. We didn't have social media with all these amazing advocates that are out there now sharing their stories. We had to learn about it on our own. And my mom was really the driver in a lot of that because she would watch stuff. If there happened to be a special or something about somebody with Tourette syndrome, she would watch it, but then I wasn't allowed to watch it with her for the first time. She wanted to make sure that it didn't talk about all the things like she wanted to make sure I wasn't watching somebody talk about it in a very negative light. So that's where I would think about myself. And I'm very happy about that because I don't remember ever feeling like I couldn't do something because of Tourette syndrome. And I think that's because of my mom and dad and because of them helping me advocate, helping me realize that talking about it was normal. And that it just came up. My family let me tick when when I had the tick. And we had to learn about it. If I wanted other people to know about it, then I needed to read up about it too. I wanted to be able to describe the distinct parts about it. I wanted to be able to describe more to somebody to really understand what it was, not just something they hear in passing or hear that joke or anything like that. And so as I got older, I started finding stuff on my own as well, and I started finding those jokes. Unfortunately, I started finding those people making fun of people with Tourette syndrome. There was some YouTube channels dedicated to a person pretending they have Tourette's the whole time, making fun of it. And I started seeing those movies talking about Tourette syndrome and having that one person because that was the funny thing. And then that punchline in that movie. And so I started realizing how much more advocacy and how much more awareness we needed because I can count on one hand, how many movies there are with people with characters who just happen to have Tourette syndrome. It's just a part of their character development. Not where they're just the punchline every single time. They do something ridiculous. They say something obnoxious and yell and scream and swear. And that's the majority of it. I could probably count on both hands how many movies I've seen about it, how many times I've been turned into a joke. That's how it feels. When I see somebody with Tourette syndrome in a movie and everybody laughs and it's very clearly the joke, it gets aggravating. And it's not that I'm easily offended, it's that because that not being able to count on one hand the true representation of Tourette syndrome. If we were equally represented where people have Tourette syndrome, there's a character that just had it wouldn't be that bad. I could probably laugh off those jokes a little bit more because people would still at least know the real thing. But because we're only represented as a joke, because we're only shown as somebody to laugh at and that we're not real people, that's when it gets aggravating. People like to think that and tell us that we need to calm down and we not be so offended by everything. But the problem is that we spend our entire life being made fun of, and that's what it's called. We want to be seen and we want to have the same accommodations as everybody else. And we want to go to a grocery store because those people that swear and yell, they have every right to be in a grocery store. The grocery store is annoying no matter if somebody's yelling or they're not, in my opinion. So that's why I started realizing that this advocacy was something that I really, really, really wanted to do more of. The older I got, the more and more I just felt something calling to me to want to have talks like this, to want to be more open about it, because I wanted little kids everywhere to know that they weren't alone. I wanted adults to know that there's somebody out there fighting, somebody out there trying to spread awareness. Because in my mind, if I didn't do it, who was? Now today, there's a million amazing advocates out there. I'm connected with so many people thanks to social media. It can be a terrible thing, but it can be a beautiful thing for people like me. I have a whole community of people who trust me that I almost daily. And that's really, really cool because now I get to talk to somebody and hear like, oh, I do that too, or oh, you have the same tick as me. And that's cool. And then when I talk to parents, I will never forget the one time a parent messaged me and said that her son was watching one of my YouTube videos and he turned around and said, Mom, she's like me. And she said that he had a big smile on his face, and that made me cry because that's exciting. Because when I was a little kid, I didn't see that. I didn't see anybody like me. I was the only one doing this that I knew of. There could very easily have been people around with Tourette syndrome, and I had no idea. But that's what reminds me why this advocacy is so important. So it started out in school. My motto of get to them before they get to me. And that was my thing of telling people what I had. I wanted to tell them, look, sometimes my face does weird stuff, sometimes my body does weird stuff, but it's because I have Tourette syndrome, and that's that. In my opinion, I've always been a person that's, if you don't like me, then whatever. And I've always thought, like, if somebody doesn't like me because I have Tourette syndrome, or if somebody has an issue with me ticking, then that was a problem they had to deal with. I didn't care, because I wasn't going to stop to please them, because I couldn't, for one. And two, there was something else that they had to handle in their own head if they wanted to judge me like that and do that.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
What age did you discover that attitude? But how did how did other people deal with
My attitude about it? Honestly, I think it helped me, because people were pretty accepting of me growing up. Because I think I seemed more sure of myself than people would expect you to when you have something like Tourette syndrome. Because I always felt like the more normal, I'm gonna use normal as close because I am normal, for the most part. But the more normal I talked about it and made it seem, I felt like that created that normal response. I created that atmosphere where it's like, oh, well, then that's just what she does. Like, that's fine. Like, if she can talk about it like that, then it must not be that big of a deal. Because if she doesn't care, I wanted to show, like, I didn't care. So you can't get to me. You can't get to me because I know that I do this. And I know that it's funny, like, sometimes, don't get me wrong, I'll laugh at some of the stuff I do. I accidentally hit my husband half the time when we're in bed with my arm tics. And you have to be able to laugh at it. But the point was, I always made sure that it was very obvious that you had to be laughing with me, not at me. Because I also was the type of person that wasn't afraid to stick up for myself after. If somebody had to make fun of me, I would confront them.
So you were diagnosed at 6. Going into school.
Mhm. School? I would say at 6 or 7, I was younger. That was probably my mom telling the teachers for me at those ages. But even throughout that, so I was in middle school when I was about 10. And I believe that's when I started really writing about it and all those things. In my mind, that was the easiest way to explain myself to the teachers. If I could pick the topic I would write about, I would always 100% without a doubt pick Tourette syndrome. Because writing, for one, was always the way that I could express myself the best. And two, I was able to explain myself right in that paper. I didn't have to do research on that paper because I knew what it was, I looked at it, and it was my teacher's. Yes, it was my teacher's way of learning about it. It was the easiest way because for me, writing my feelings always came easier, so maybe being able to do that, just like walk away, that was easier for me than either reactions right away, especially if you're young. And then if I could report in front of the class, I always did that as well because I wanted my classmates to know that this is what I had. And I don't know if I was just really blessed and lucky with the school system I had. My teachers, for the most part, were pretty okay, and my classmates, because they knew. So I went to the same school from 4th grade to graduation, so they were the ones that really knew. And they always just knew. I would have people coming up to me every once in a while saying, I heard somebody making fun of Tourette syndrome the other day, and I told them to stop because I know somebody that has that. And it was because I told a story. It'd be somebody that I wasn't even that really friends with. And I remember a girl in my one English class I was taking pretty badly, and again, I really wasn't friends with her, but she knew I had Tourette syndrome. So she whispered over me, asking if I was okay. And I just gave her a little nod, and that's it, and she went out. So it helped me to be open because know, I just think it helped the kids understand, because in my mind, the younger they learn about it, the more understanding they are. Because when kids are young and they don't understand something, in my head, they get scared. And so they go to joking, they go to making fun of somebody or something like that. And I just didn't want to get made fun of. I was already really short, and I also had Tourette Syndrome. I had all these things people could make fun of, and I just, I don't know, I think I just refused to let people do that. And I did have a teacher that noted it to me once, and it was traumatizing a little bit for me, and I still think about it, and I can still get upset about that one. Still get upset about it. Yes. We were in art class, and I was by his desk, because he always had to draw to his desk and show me the right way to draw. This person's not my favorite person. And I was lucky to have to stay right next to him. And in his defense, I will only give him is that he didn't know how to transcript. So all of my teachers all the time, a lot of times when I'm concentrated, they can slow down. And this teacher was known for not being nice, just wasn't, in my opinion, a nice teacher. And I was right by him. He was, drawing on his paper and telling us how to do it. And I was ticking. And he looked up at me, and I remember, this is another one that I remember the color of the shirt. I remember his eyes looking above his glasses and saying, "Would you please sit still?" Just like that. And I was too afraid, because this teacher was not a nice man. I was too afraid to even defend myself in that moment to say, I can't. But I just said, okay, and I sat there and I stood like this, looking at the ground the entire time, trying not to cry. And my best friend at the time put her hand on my back, because she knew what was happening. She just kind of whispered to me, asking if I was taking, and that's all it was, in my pocket and started crying. And so I didn't say anything, and I regret that to this day, not saying something to him. But I still believe, without a doubt, that he wouldn't have believed me. And I only say that because I had a cousin who had a certain disorder, a bone disorder, who was sitting at a gym class, and she told him that because he said, "Don't give me like excuses." And when I heard her tell me that story, to me, it confirmed it. Now I don't know, I'm making that up, I'm making an assumption in my head, but he created an environment where I didn't feel safe to begin with. To me, that's still on him, because he should have been the teacher and noticed that something was wrong, and he didn't. He just wanted to apparently embarrass me in front of the class.
I would just keep in mind that
I hope he does. I don't know if we'll ever find out.
it would be nice.
Yeah, I did have really great teachers though too, and those are the ones I focused on. So I think I'm just created that atmosphere that I wanted to be, and I didn't allow people to walk all over me. I mean, I think because I was so small, I had that like small dog syndrome almost. Yeah, I wanted to let people know, like, I might be small, but I'm mighty. It's not gonna hurt me. You know, maybe I'll cry about it later afterwards, but right in your face, you're not gonna hurt me. So that's what I learned in school. That turned into all my social media outlets, my YouTube channel. I remember sitting in front of my computer one night. Actually, no, I remember talking about making YouTube videos probably a couple years with my husband. And being the supportive person that he is, he constantly just didn't do it. I think that I could tell him that I wanted to start training for a 50-mile marathon, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I can do that." And be completely serious. He would tell me that he would never do it with me. He would do anything in his power to help me. He'd always pull me up and tell me that I would do all these crazy things that I want to do, including something like this right now. And I kept telling him, and finally I was like, "You know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it." And I made the video, and I waited hours for it. It's too afraid to post it. You know, people are mean online, and keep saying you can't hurt me. I'm still a person. It still does hurt a little bit. And people get really mean online because, you can't see them. You can't get repercussions from that. And I was nervous about that. And so I made it, and I sat there laying in bed, hovering over that post button. He was already asleep, and I think I waited long enough to where I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. So I posted and instantly fell asleep. And that's what I did. I shut my laptop and went to sleep. Someone came in, woke me up the next day and said, hey, have you been on, like, have you gotten up and got on media at all yet? And I said, no, I'm feeling great. And he's like, you should probably get on. Like, we're saying a lot of really cool stuff. And so I did. All these people were saying all these cool things and being so supportive. People that didn't even really know me. They knew Scott or they knew my mom, my aunts, my grandma, whatever. And sharing this video, talking about what they learned just from that short video and being so supportive. And I'm like, man, I can do this now. Like, people actually want to learn more because there are times where I just think, like, man, they don't care. They don't want to learn about Tourette syndrome. It doesn't affect their lives. Why do they care? And because if they find out, then they're going to have to stop laughing at it, and they don't want to do that. So that turned into more YouTube videos, which turned into interview videos. So now I talk to other people with Tourette syndrome on the videos because my story of Tourette syndrome is my story. And it won't necessarily connect with every single person with Tourette syndrome. And I want people to see that we're all different. We're different races, ethnicities, different sexes, and we have different severities of tics. And some of us have the same tics. And I want people to be able to find somebody that looks like them, tics like them, because it's an empowering feeling to hear me too, or I do that too. Or I saw your video with so-and-so, and she tics the same exact way that I do, and I loved it. And that's really cool because my story, it might not connect with every single person with Tourette syndrome, and that's fine. But the next person I interview might. That might get to the next person. That might be the girl that they see themselves in, or the male that they see themselves in. Or I interviewed a cop with Tourette syndrome, so that might be the next kid growing up and realizing, like, hey, I can be a cop. They kept telling me that I can't be, but this guy is, so I can. And that's really awesome for me, and I love that. And that was actually one of my favorite videos I've ever done. He was probably one of the more active tickers, I guess I'll say, on my videos. And then it turned into other awareness events. So May 15th through June 15th is Tourette Syndrome Awareness Month. And every year I try to challenge myself on how I can bring awareness or raise the bar a little bit. I always try to up the ante a little bit in everything I do for Tourette Syndrome awareness, research, fundraising, whatever it might be. And so that's what led into these photos right here on the wall. That's only 3 of, I think, about maybe 10. I asked a local photographer, I messaged her, and I said, hey, I really want to I was like, this might sound weird. I have Tourette syndrome, and I really want you to capture my tics on film. I want to bring people into my world in a brand new way. And so I had these tics captured. I just sat on a stool. We kept it very minimal because that's what I wanted. I wanted the message to get across the most. And she just talked to me about Tourette syndrome. She recorded it and just asked me questions because she didn't know anything about Tourette's really either. She only knew the jokes. And she just talked to me about it. And because I was nervous, I ticked a lot, which worked out well for photo shoot, I suppose. But I was very nervous about it because ticking with my face and ticking with my whole body, as a female already, you already have a lot of self-conscious issues. As somebody who does all of these things in your body, you've had even more, I feel like, I felt like I did, and I always felt very ugly when I ticked. Very, very ugly. And when I saw these videos for the very first time in my life, I felt like I was beautiful even when I ticked. And so that made me really happy. And that bottom photo is actually my favorite photo of myself ever, because it shows that I can still laugh and smile even when I'm ticking like that, ticking that much. And it just made me feel, I think these photos made me feel better about myself than probably some of the way I look in some of my wedding photos. And that was powerful to me. And a lot of people connected to it and reached out to me. It was really, again, just a really uplifting experience. So every single time I try to find this new way to raise awareness and be an advocate, it seems to connect people in a different way, which just motivates me that much more to keep doing that, keep finding those new ways, keep figuring out ways to connect to new people, and keep just talking to people, whether it's one person, whether it's 2 people, whether it's a table full of my family that already know my story. It doesn't matter because it helps. And then all of this stuff led into now I have a book coming out early 2022, which has been my lifelong dream to write a book about Tourette syndrome. And that's another way for me to spread awareness, because now I have in that book, I have call outs to teachers, I have call outs to employers of how they're helping people with disabilities, how they're dealing with people with disabilities. I have spots in that book to make them sit and think about how they're handling employees with disabilities, if they have any of these stigmas already in their head. Should they be doing anything different? The same thing with teachers, as well as support systems, because not everybody with Tourette syndrome had the support system I had. My life would be completely different without all of these people sitting here and the other part of our gigantic family. And so I want those people without that support system, or those support systems that maybe aren't supporting as much as somebody needs. And because it really doesn't take much, it's just accepting it, not telling me to stop when I'm thinking, not making fun of me when I'm thinking, letting me call you at 31 years old when I'm crying or when I have that sick day. That's all it really takes, is to know I have their support, because then I know I have that group of people that I can go to and be myself with. Even if it's just 2 people, no matter what it is, and I kind of speak about that in that book as well. And I don't think I would have gotten to every single one of those steps if I didn't start advocating in one way or another. If I didn't start in school, I don't think it would have gone into all these other things. And then why I advocate, I think I kind of explained that while I talk, but it's because it's important, simple enough. It's the most important thing for me in my life. I think I was meant to be a person to spread awareness and help people with Tourette syndrome. I truly do. I think that I was given Tourette syndrome for a reason, and that's why I can be thankful for it in some ways. Like I said, if I woke up tomorrow and never tick ever again, it'd be the best days of my life. However, I would never go back and wish that I had never had Tourette syndrome, ever, because I would be a completely different person, I think. I wouldn't have the strength, I guess, that everybody said I have, and I don't think I'd be able to have empathy or anything like that, or in some instances, not be so quick to judge. If I see someone in the store doing something weird, sometimes I'll remember to pull myself back and be like, all right, they probably have something. Sometimes I'll even just talk to my husband or my mom, like, do you think that person has Tourette syndrome? Because the way they move, I just feel like I pick up on it sometimes. It kind of seems similar. And I advocate as well because when I was that little girl, not knowing why my body was doing all of these things, not knowing if anybody liked me, even though I had this incredible support system, you know, it still feels kind of lonely and like nobody truly understands because they can't. No fault of anybody else. They can't completely 110% understand unless they feel it, unless they live it. And that was kind of, you know, on the bad days, that's where it sucks. That's where I get upset because I'm by myself, even though I know I'm not. And I don't want anybody to ever feel like that. I don't want kids growing up thinking that they're the only ones that do this and they're doomed and their life is over and that they can't do anything. I want them to realize that they can do whatever they want to do. And I'm going to try and change the minds of those people that might stop them along the way. And I want them to realize that there's people like them, that there's people fighting for them, that there's people educating and advocating for them. I want no other little kid to feel alone while they grow up. And I don't want adults either, because a lot of adults just get diagnosed because all their lives everybody said that, oh, it's just a nervous tick. And they're just not getting diagnosed and they're in this new realm and realizing they're feeling so relieved because they finally have this answer. They finally understand why their body has done this their entire life. I don't want anybody else to feel like that. And most importantly, I don't want anybody to be kicked out of classrooms anymore. I get so upset when I hear people say that their son was kicked out of the classroom. Or I've been told that teachers have turned around and made it a point to specifically stare at the person who has ticked in class every single time they ticked. And at that point, that's the teacher being a bully. And it infuriates me. And that shouldn't be happening. And I don't want people to deal with that anymore. And I want people to get hired. I want them to realize that we're horrible. Because when I was growing up, I get worried when I got to like past like jobs at McDonald's and stuff, or even there. It's just because I had Tourette syndrome didn't mean I couldn't work and I couldn't be a good worker. Most of the time, if you hire somebody with a disability, I'd be willing to bet that they're going to be the hardest worker in the room because they spent their entire lives trying to prove everybody wrong that they couldn't do it. And I'm the same way. I want to do an excellent job as part of my perfectionism as well. But it's because on those days where my tics do get in the way, I want them to remember all the great stuff I did prior to that and that I'll keep doing after that. I want them to realize that I have days that hold me back sometimes, which is hard to admit, but doesn't mean I can't get right back on it the next day or maybe a couple of days, whatever, however long it might be. And so that's why I advocate, and that's why it's so important to me to be advocating and be doing stuff like this and talking to all of you. And then at that point, I'll usually open it up for questions. I don't know if any of my family members have questions, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've got that. And you were in the middle. We have your hand. And all of a sudden you fall down and shoved up.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Kind of wonder, you know, it's like. And I got looked at. She did it again, but it scared him in a way because he realized it's. He never saw it before. It always hurt when he saw you in the house. He always hurt. And I think the strange thing is that nobody knows. I mean, if you see a person in a wheelchair or crutches, but when you don't see it, it's hard to explain.
Yeah. You don't get it.
Right?
Because it's probably weird to sit there and see me doing all these things, and like, there's no way you can't stop that. But for me, it's weird for me to sit here and watch all of me not know. It's really weird when I sit and really think about it. It's so strange to me because I don't know any other way. I don't remember a time where I didn't do this. Like I was young, so I don't remember anything before that. And
They think that you should have been hard. You were sitting on front of me, you get from like this. Oh, quit. I mean, that's.
yeah, when I was younger, I had no idea until I got back in the car.
You're not gonna call me, I mean, I went to the appointment the first time with him. Yeah, and then afterwards, she said, it really hit me hard. It really did.
He hit my dad hard.
I was crying.
So tell us a little bit
Mhm.
about what prejudices faced in those 10 years that you were non-existent.
This questions like this one always take me back to a job that I had 6 years ago, maybe. I worked in a pool company, and it was not a great job. They didn't treat people very well there. But I was talking about Tourette Syndrome to somebody in the room with me, and we were in our office that we were in, it used to be a supply closet, so it was not big. And there was 5 of us in there, it was just an order entry, and I was talking to my friend at the time, and she was genuinely asking questions about Tourette Syndrome. She was genuinely wanting to know more about it. And we were just talking, having a casual conversation, her and I, our own little conversation, and this woman turned around and said that she just had to say that Tourette syndrome didn't really matter as much as things like depression or bipolar or anything else because people knew what Tourette syndrome were. They don't know what those other things are. And I don't know if I've ever bit my tongue so hard in my life because I didn't want to get in trouble for something that she said that she was in the wrong. I simply just said something to the effect of like, well, that's not true. People don't know what Tourette syndrome is. Just because you know me doesn't mean everyone knows. And I just turned around back to the computer and didn't say anything the rest of the time. And my friends and I went on a walk. We would take 15-minute breaks and walk outside the building. It's nice out. And as soon as the door shut, I was like, Tourette syndrome doesn't matter? And they thought at that time, like one French said, this is it. This is when Britney's gonna punch her. And I just bit my tongue, and it really bothered me because I couldn't fathom that somebody would not only think that, but have the nerve to say it to somebody with the disorder themselves. Because what they see at work is only half the battle. They don't see what happens at home. Because when I'm at work, I'm concentrated. I'm in the zone, doing what I need to do. When I get home or even in the car, I start thinking. Not a lot in cars, like when I first get in. Once I start driving, I'm usually perfectly fine. And it was just, it blew my mind that she would even have the nerve to say that to me. And it bothered me so much, and I wasn't gonna do anything about it. And it was a Friday, and that whole weekend I was bothered by it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. thought about it, and he told me that I needed to say something to somebody higher up, because as much as I didn't want to see it as what I had from disability, I used to struggle with thinking about it that way. I've since have realized that it's not a bad word, and it's true. That she was not harassing, but, saying verbally to me an abusive thing in my mind. And I didn't want her to think that that was an okay thing to do anymore, and I wanted her to know that that was a problem. And so I told somebody, and they pretended like they cared, but nothing at all. She got all huffy. I think they talked to her about it. She got all huffy. I don't think so. I think it has benefited me because it's made me work, I feel like, much harder to prove people wrong and prove the statistic. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Probably. Or we just don't know, because I mean, it's like so long. Yeah.
I always tell the story. When we were young, we had this. And I said, I'll never see that anymore. I don't think. Granddaughter. And I wanted to get her more. Because I think when you use those, you get take out your frustration on this thing. And lo and behold, what it does, it comes right back to your face. And that's life. And so it teaches you a lot about life in that particular environment. No matter how hard you hit it, can't keep it down. And it shows you what determination is. So I think Britney, I've said enough, but I want to say that, what you're doing is admirable. And, the world needs more. Any other questions?
Looks like maybe somebody has their hand raised on the Zoom here. Let's see a little person. Yeah.
Any questions on this?
Yeah, I think. I don't know if there's one in the chat. Okay, so somebody asked, does the Valley have local support groups for kids with Tourette's? If a 7-year-old is just getting diagnosed with Tourette's and wants to meet other kids that are like him with 6, is there anything local? Unfortunately, I don't know. I know there's an Ohio chapter and there's an Ohio group that has people that meet every so often. I only know this because of Facebook, but they're in the Cleveland area. I don't know of one around here. It's on my list of things to eventually do, to have a support group around here. So I do feel that one day I will hopefully make that happen. But one really good resource, even if it's just to get connected with people virtually, is the Tourette Syndrome Association. You can go to tourette.org and they can connect you with people in your area, or just like different people in the Tourette community. There's Facebook pages with Tourette syndrome advocates in there, or parents with children with Tourette syndrome, and that's a really good thing. I think social media is a really great place to start, as scary as it can be. But yeah, the Tourette Syndrome Association, they can probably get you connected with somebody as close as possible. But keep your eye out, because that is, I think I talked to you about it a few months ago, that I wanted to start something here. Yes, it is.
So I know it most people. One question. How do you do it? How does that usually?
And Britney, the night we really met the first talk, she shared that she had Tourette's that learning experience for me. I had a friend that I later found out that he did have Tourette's, and it was had some things like that. It was a learning experience for me. I think just have more empathy and learn more and be supportive of her. And just, yeah, she's a crazy strong woman, and she has accomplished a ton of stuff, and that's why I support her. It's like it's a passion that I don't know away. Being changed over for me, it was different, but I just wanted to be accepted as a good support, not making a deal about it, just try to help her. She's happy to I learned from her parents having a lot. They did a really good job of raising her right away, being supportive of her too. So I kind of
She's small, something like that.
yes.
Yes, oh,
Yes.
yeah. I'll give you the first one.
Like the fight your mom for.
Okay, second.
So that's great, Britney. So, any more questions online?
Eddie.
Well, thank you very much for your talk tonight. I think that it is really inspiring to fight. I think when you have something like you do, when you're facing an issue, but the world moves fast. If you were quote unquote normal, I don't think anybody. Yeah. But, well, thank you very much, Britney.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
having me. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
All right, thanks everybody online.
Thank you.
Take care.